So I wanted to invite someone onto the podcast this time that is a technical person with a long-standing career, but who isn't tied to a particular company and isn't in a position of seniority, but is very much boots on the ground, and just have a discussion about purple teaming and just sort of see what comes out of the conversation. So I invited Jon Moore onto the podcast. He's got 20 years experience. I'll let him introduce himself because he'll do himself a lot more justice than I can do. But yeah, he's great, he's interesting, and I think it turned out to be a great discussion.
My name is Jon Moore. I'm a network security professional. I've been in the industry for coming up to 30 years, honestly, and really focusing on the security and network security side of things for the past 10 years or so.
Wow, 30 years, Jesus, that's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I got into computers at a really, really early age. I remember with like some Commodore 64 things and getting hooked on some programming with that.
Wow, so you've been in security before it was security. When it was
In a way, yeah. It's always caught my eye. It's always had my attention. I remember it was a little game. It was a Commodore 64 game, and it was in some kind of magazine. And you just kind of literally copied the code out of the magazine, and then you kind of had fun with it and whatever. But then I would go back into the code and I would change things around, and I would basically kind of hack the game and kind of give myself invulnerability or get rid of the collision detection and stuff like that.
There's a lot of people that have got an interest in hacking, and it's come from computer games, which is great, and it makes me wish that I took Lara Croft more seriously when I was younger. I used to have an Atari. I don't know the numbers of it, but I used to have an Atari, and I used to play a game called Titus the Fox. I don't know if you ever came across that.
Oof, nope, not ringing a bell off the top.
That was seriously early 90s. And then a Sega Mega Drive, and I got really obsessed with the game Toe Jam and Earl.
Oh, yes.
Do you know that one?
It rings a bell, yes. It's been a while.
Yeah. It's like these weird little blobs that run around drinking root beer, and it was just really, really strange game to play as a child. But hey ho. So what's your within that 30 years, what's been your experience in purple teaming? Like, has it been called purple teaming or?
No, I mean I've not heard of the term purple team until probably within this past year or so. And it seems that kind of my life's experiences almost kind of tend towards it. Most of my professional career has been essentially blue team-ish. It's been product support. So I've been supporting the firewall administrators with their firewall products. And in so doing, kind of, I've seen every mistake in the book, as the saying would go. And then on the flip side, I've always had that kind of hacker mentality and that kind of attack and break fix. Putting these two kind of sides together, I never really kind of thought of it that way, but with this new kind of introduction with this, the blue team and the defenders, and then the red team stuff, kind of purple teams right in the middle, right in the perfect middle between them. And so kind of it's this kind of like nice little perfect marriage of everything I've seen and done and everything I'm interested in. So like one of the ideas that that really kind of, I think, maybe in my mind anyways, highlights the idea of what purple security, purple team kind of highlights is this idea that, red and blue, both sides have something to teach and learn from each other. And when we think of like a capture the flag or a hack the box or some kind of red team engagement, right? One of the first things we do is like an nmap or a port scan. On the blue team side of things, we can learn from that and adapt, right? So the current and I want to say it's like a 30-year-old and probably even older mindset is to only respond to ports that you're using. Right, so on the red team, as an attacker, I know that when I do my nmap scan and I see these ports open, these are the only things that are relevant to me. On the blue side, and kind of coming back a little bit to that purple, is how can I use that to attack or defend, or maybe in my mind the way I'm thinking of it is trolling the hackers, right? So, right. So instead of only responding to these dozen or so ports that are really relevant, there's over 65,000 of them. Respond to all of them.
Leaving, in a sense, canary tokens while you
E-
analyze what they're doing.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
then on here myself, I've kind of implemented that at home as well, and and it goes back and forth like that. So, and then if we think of so not just responding to those, right? When we think of like a TCP connection, we've got our SYN, SYNAC, and ACK. The next packet in that series needs to come from the client, telling the server what it is the client's looking for, right? On the server side of things, or on the defender side, how can we further troll them? And the answer is just kind of give them everything they want.
This is really interesting. So you're the first person I've spoken to on this podcast that's got a really different perception of purple teaming, which is awesome and makes for a great conversation. I like to do purple teaming really transparent, have everyone in the same room and have almost like a brief, an adversary emulation brief to play against, and have the red teamers and identifying blind spots that way. But you're talking about doing it in more of a gamification kind of way, essentially trolling, as you say, and sort of, I don't know, really making a point of keeping it a secret, keeping your cards close to you and doing it that way, which is really interesting. But I've not done purple teaming that way. I've done some red team exercises, responded to red team exercises from a blue teamer's point of view that way. But I always find that blue teamers are inundated with, in my experience when it's been gamified, we're always inundated with business as usual tasks. You've always got projects that you have to work on as well, unless you're in a huge company that can afford to silo everyone. Then you're responding to alerts, and then if there's something it's the red team, you tend to ignore it because it's safe, essentially. In my experience, gamification has worked great for upskilling the red team, but it's been just noise for the blue team. So how do you suggest people get around that?
Well, I don't know. Honestly, simply put, I have no idea. I mean, it almost comes back to this, to the original, and I know it's definitely over 30 years old. That old school mentality of only responding to ports that you're using, right? And if you think of how ingrained that mentality is, and then just the further security mentalities, I think it's, there's no simple answer to this. My thought process isn't so much like a purple team, like a one-time engagement, but more of almost like just an architectural way of thinking. Right. So when you're setting things up, right, you don't want to, these aren't things that you want to, I mean, some of these things that I've done are really, really super, super simple, and they can be set up in, like a day. But the idea is that you're setting this up and you're architecting your whole network and solution around this kind of almost like this trolling idea.
Yeah, with honey nets and honey pots and various other bits and bobs. Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's great. And I think with that, it's a great way of upskilling your blue team if they then have the opportunity to analyze the output.
So like one of the really funny things that I've seen as a result of setting this up, like I've got a firewall and all kinds of alerting set up, and I used to get all kinds of alerts of, for example, China and Russia doing whatever, right? Doing port scans, connecting to various ports. I have an SSH honeypot. They're doing SSH connections and so on. But comically enough, as the weeks and months passed, those have hugely dropped off. And now, like I go months and months without seeing any kind of attack or activity from China and Russia, for example. It's almost like they're kind of detecting or seeing that my IP address is wrong. It's not right. It's not acting right. So it almost seems like I get blacklisted or ignored as a result.
You get blacklisted by the hackers. That's amazing. I love it. On your LinkedIn profile, it says construction subcontractor. Tell me about this. That's interesting. If you don't mind, you don't have to.
Yeah,
I'm
sure
so
thing.
not handy at all. So as soon as someone's good with anything to do with construction or maintenance, I'm like, Educate me, please.
So it was a turn of fate. If you look to my immediately previous experience, it was at Dell.
Yeah.
And then we got laid off. Everybody got laid off. It was right at the start of that 2008 economic downturn.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So I got laid off, and then here our government put on they called it a second career program, and the idea was that, like, there was so many people that got laid off, and then the idea was that, okay, you got laid off from your current career, we will fund you, we will pay for your schooling, your tuition, some living expenses, and so on, to put you back to school to take this second career. Construction, it was advanced housing. So it's like all building green, eco-friendly homes. If you really try hard and you look for it, you can find transferable skills in really absolutely everything you do. And a good example is like doing this, right? I got really in with all the construction I did. I got to passing along a lot of cable, a lot of wiring for your electrical and all your networking and stuff. So that kind of translated to some really good skills when I've had to network and cable out, a server rack, for example.
Yeah.
And then just kind of that spatial awareness and so on. If you really look for it, you got transferable skills on anything.
I really like the fact that you're pointing out transferable skills. I think there's such a deficit of cybersecurity professionals in the world, and yet we've got so many people with such interesting skill sets that work in seemingly completely unrelated fields. Specifically, like in the military, even if they don't come from a technical background, there's almost a security mindset that can be applied, especially when put into a corporate environment. Let's say that there's someone listening to this right now and they're, in a similar position. They work at a vendor or wherever, in the cyber defense team, and they really want to get some experience with purple teaming, but there's no buy-in. How does someone get that buy-in internally?
I would say try to prove it out, right? So, for example, myself, I have a rather extensive home lab, and I've proven it out in my home lab. So, and I would even encourage, yourself or even your listeners, if you want, run an Nmap scan against my domain, jonmoore.duckdns.org.
Say that again, just so it's totally clear.
Sure thing. jonmoore.duckdns.org.
Duck as in whack, whack.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Great.
Yeah,
okay.
So Jon, so JONMOORE.duckdns.org. DuckDNS just offers a free dynamic DNS service.
Okay.
And run an Nmap scan, right? I would encourage you to try. And if you can and want to, let me know what you think and what you see, because I'm going to respond to all 535 ports. I'm going to respond to all of them, right? You could try connecting with Telnet, and if you can do so now, I encourage you to do that as well. And I'm going to give you a connection. Now, whether or not it's what you want and what you're looking for, but I'm going to give you something.
You're such a troll. It's great.
Right? Try sending DNS queries to me. What do you want? I got it. Right? Everything's going to resolve to my public IP. The idea here is that now you've proven it out. Right? So now you've got these known, right? When you think of like an Nmap scan as a red team tactic, right? It's not like this is some secretive tactic, right? It's not like it's not unheard of or nobody knows what this is or hackers keep it close to the heart. No, this is well known. Everybody knows this is step one, right? So in terms of security and bringing that security awareness internally, obviously you're going to have to start small and find your advocates, but you've got it proved out. Show it to them, right? Show them the Nmap scan and the results, right? Show them kind of all the little rabbit holes that you send them down, and combine that with essentially how little time and effort was really put into it.
I really like the idea of adversary emulation trolling like as a service. So looking at an adversary and looking at the customer and then roping it all together. into something that's meaningful for the customer. I really love the idea. I think it's hilarious, a hilarious idea of placing like trolling cards on everything an adversary would go for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's really
That would
and
be
that's the plan of
hilarious.
and that's the plan of what I'm trying to work with and trying to accomplish here. And then that way, eventually, I mean, if you try to connect on port 80, you're going to see I obviously have a website there. So there are obviously some ports that are really in use, but good luck identifying them.
Oh, I think you could do this as a service. You should do this as a business. This is a really cheesy ad break. This podcast was brought to you by Pocket Seam, the world's most cost-effective seam service. The adversary emulation stuff, like we will look at specific threat actors, go through their individual TTPs and whether or not they align to the customer environment. And if they do, we'll map them into an attack plan. And then the blue team and the red team, they get that exactly the same information. And we'll say, I'll say to like Bob, I want you to scan this machine in this way. And then I'll say, Sally, blue teamer, can you see that? Yes, I can see it. Can you do anything about it? No. Okay, that's something we need to deal with. And then we'll go and deal with it. And then we'll come back and we'll do it again. And then we evidence to the CISO or whoever that capability is now in-house. So it's pretty good, but I really do like the idea of doing that and leaving trolls. Traditionally, with purple teaming, the attack vector doesn't really matter. So whether it came in via a phishing email or a drive-by download or someone plugged in a USB or blah, whatever, it doesn't really matter. What matters is you just can assume compromise and just work from there. So if you're doing it the way that you like to do it, where you just kind of leave calling cards, leave canary tokens and whatnot about the network, how do you deal with the attack vector? Do you assume compromise, or do you just not even? That question didn't even make sense, did it, John?
I think I see where you're going.
I've not had enough alcohol.
I don't. My thought process doesn't really care how or where you're coming from. Right now it's set up, for my own home lab, it's set up to only really troll the outside, but with a couple of clicks and a couple of like just simple firewall and natting rules, you could just as easily troll your internal network as well, in the same kind of fashions. So if you, depending on your level of paranoia, right, setting up an internal trolling like that, right, you just set up the right kind of firewall rule, done.
And, also if you had a honey network, the amount of threat intelligence you could get from that would be kind of immense.
Yeah, it's massive.
But a lot of companies have got the resources to do it, or they don't recognize the value in it. And what always concerns me about honey nets and honeypots in a corporate environment is, let's say that you leave some dummy data on there so that if an attacker gets in your network, they aim for that. It looks enticing. They take it, they exfiltrate it out of the environment. Maybe they paste it on Pastebin, and then that gets attributed to you. What's your defense then? Like in the media, oh, it's fake. People will just be like, fuck off. No, it's not. You're not looking after our data. And you might actually be taking it really serious. So I'm quite skeptical about honey nets and honeypots and stuff in corporate environments, but that's my only reason why.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I don't know how you would handle that. My thoughts would be, like, a good example would be, if you're giving, if in your HoneyNet you're setting up some fake social insurance numbers or social security numbers, right? Those are pretty reasonably easy to validate, right? You can, if you're worried that your social is on there, you could just look on the list, see the name attributed to it, clearly not you. So there you go. It's not a big problem. And there are a number of open source scripts and packages that can do exactly that. They will generate 1,000 fake records of names, addresses, socials, phone numbers, and then you can store it in text files or databases, and there you go, right? You know someone's looking for that kind of stuff, so you go give them something fake to look at that may be attributed to you, but then you've got the defense of, this, if you're transparent, right? You tell them the truth. Hey, yeah, we've got to set up a honey net. This is the kind of thing we're doing. Right? Look how fake this data is. Look at it. Right? If you take a look at, for example, some of the documents, right? If they're all lorem ipsum documents, clearly it's pretty fake, regardless of what the title may look like.
I don't really think it matters if it's obviously fake or not. I think the brand damage could be irreparable. If you think like Ashley Madison, I'm just picking names out of a hat here. If you think of like the Ashley Madison attack, if like a day later they came out and went, "Oh, don't worry, it's all fake. That's all fake," people would be like, "Yeah, fuck off. We're not using that website."
I don't know. I would tend to think maybe not. They might be like, that might be their first response, but then, actually take a look at the data, and that's where in the end, hopefully, you'll get those good journalists and good bloggers and investigators that really dive into the data, and they're going to be like, yeah, right. If you think of
absolutely.
Have I Been Pwned, right, and the
Yeah,
service
I love
they
that.
offer, right, they're going to take a look at that and just laugh it off. They're going to, fat chance, buddy.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. But your everyday
Right, and then
person, like it's the brand damage for the everyday person, isn't
then
it?
in a way, you're doing the reverse to the hackers, because now these hackers clearly don't know that they're releasing bogus fake data. What kind of hacker group is this? Right? And you're just as equally trolling them, right? And if you've got the right kind of PR and the right kind of bloggers and investigators looking into this, you could spin this around and turn it back on them and be like, these Russians, look at this. What is this? Clearly fake data that they're releasing as a breach. Come on, boys.
Oh, I love your attitude. I think it's great.
So
Okay.
I think that's, I think, part of the challenge of trying to adopt that kind of mentality, because like you said, there's the brand damage, right? But you're trying to troll them, so it's this back and forth of blue team versus red team, and you got to find that purple middle ground, right? And so maybe you don't go all out and you don't give them databases, fake databases, but maybe you just give them a few fake ports, and in the end, you're in control of what data you're giving them. So you don't want to give them that kind of info. Don't give them just fake reports, right? Fake financial reports that don't even make sense. Right? In the end, we're not trying to give them data that they're gonna seriously investigate. But even if they spend 5 minutes downloading this fake data and then they open it up, and as soon as they realize they open it up and it's fake, right? Even if that's 5 minutes wasted, that's 5 minutes you're wasting of their time. And the more time you waste and the more hurdles and pain and misery you put in front of them, eventually they're just going to say, forget this. This is an endless series of rabbit holes. Moving on.
So are you like a massive fan of retribution as well then? How do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about poking the bear, so to speak?
I would not go the reverse, right? So this is all kind of in a defensive way, right? If we think of like a fortress, right?
Yeah.
This is all you trying to get into my fortress, right? Yes, I'm redirecting you to a bunch of endless mazes and sandboxes, but you're coming to me. I'm just redirecting you, right? Which would be entirely different than me going to you and poking and prodding. I think that starts to get a dangerous game, because there's the whole, attribution is a major, major problem. And I mean, as a security professional, I know how simple it is to hide my IP. Right? So just because this attack is coming from this IP doesn't mean that IP address is responsible for launching it or starting it. So myself, I don't think I would go so far as to poke back, but hey, you're in my playground. Yeah, I'm going to send you on. I'm going to have fun with you.
Oh, I wonder how many people, when this is released, you'll have to tell me how many people Nmap scan your your domain?
I look forward to it. I get notifications every time I get port scanned, and I always investigate them because I want to know, like, oh, you just did you did it. What did you find? What did
Yeah.
you see in those results?
Well, it's actually a fantastic way of learning like network log analysis as well.
So that's actually one of the funny things I've actually managed to discover and kind of find out about some of these attack patterns through these log analysis. So one of the things I have is an SSH honeypot, and it doesn't just record the commands you ran, it records like the keystrokes. Right, so I can see how fast or slow you typed in that command. And the vast majority was clearly bots. And you could tell they were bots because the command would be pasted in one piece, right? So it clearly wasn't typed in, it was pasted in. And then what they would do is they would run a wget or a curl and try to download a piece of malware. And then they would try to make it executable and then try to run it. But the thing is they would paste the commands, right? And then so they'd paste the download command, then they'd paste the chmod command before the download was even finished. And then now we're trying to run the command, run that executable, and we're still waiting for the download to finish in the first place.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Hopefully we'll get a few listeners. And I'll speak to you again sometime. Keep in touch.
Absolutely, Eliza. Thanks for having me here. It was great.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Purple Team podcast. That was Jon Moore. I think you can agree that was a pretty fun discussion.